Colin. And
Hi,
Noah.
Colin. Hi,
How are
Don.
you?
All good. How about you? Good to see
Good,
you.
good. Thank you.
Awesome.
I don't know if Dawn has been joining before. I think so. And who is Baker Girl?
Victor seems a little
It says
bit
in your
low
face.
volume.
My volume is low. Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
just a touch. Yeah. Your volume is a bit low.
Okay, how about now?
Oh, yeah, that's better.
Okay, all right. So, hi everyone. I believe we are also live now. Let me check. Yes. Wait.
Yeah, just a touch. Yeah. Your
Okay, that was the live stream, the latency of the live stream. Okay, guys, let's go. So, for those of you who know, most of you actually do know the attendance on the Zoom call, but also for the people watching us on YouTube and on Facebook, let us say this one more time and a few more times afterwards. We are Victor and Luca. We are both instructors at the GuitarZoom Academy. So basically, what we do over here is just a tiny little portion of what we do at the GuitarZoom Academy. So we have lessons like this every day of the week on different subjects. We also have open rooms, which are Q&A sessions. We also have one-on-one lessons, and we do that in a very personalized, very well structured fashion for each student. And if you like what you see over here, you can consider joining the Academy. I'll just drop this link over here for you to book your first call with the Academy if you feel like it. And I'm also gonna drop that link here in the YouTube chat on the live stream, as well as in the Facebook live stream. Let me just find that. Give me a second. Okay, here we go. So, today's subject, guys, is Music Theory 101. And I wish I had someone telling me what we're about to tell you today and what we're about to share with you. Because let me tell you, when I started out, there was I thought of music theory as something that was invented by some people in the church or some very uncool baroque people or whatever. I didn't know it had anything to do with actual physics and with how sound works in nature, okay? And I want to start this lesson from over there, if you don't mind, explaining a little bit of the physics of sound and why certain things sound more consonant and other things sound more dissonant, and why certain chords go well with each other and other chords do not belong in a certain tonality, okay? That's what we're going to talk about today. It will not be very guitar technique related, but it will have quite a lot to do with playing and making music on the guitar or any other instrument to, for that matter, okay? So I would also like if you could grab a piece of paper and a pen for what we're about to talk a bit later. Okay. Now, let me start this lesson by telling you what you probably most of you already know that sound is actually a vibration of the air molecules in the room or in whatever the surroundings may be that when vibrating, we perceive that when it hits our eardrum, we perceive that in our brains psychoacoustically as sound, as a certain note or many notes at once, or a melody or noise or whatever it may be, okay? Now, the simplest frequency that we can have is what's called a sine wave. And that means a sine wave is if we put the sound, if we measure it with an oscilloscope, it would look like a sine wave, okay? That would be if the molecules in the air are vibrating up and down, pushing and pulling the air, or raising and sucking the air pressure in the room in a very gradual manner, like that, okay? Slowly approaching, slowly descending, okay? That would be a very simple one fundamental frequency. Now, if I hear this A note, for instance, I'm gonna try and pluck it with my thumb with the tone control rolled down to make it as mellow as possible. That would be something closer to a sine wave. It will not be a perfect sine wave because it will have some overtones on top of it. We'll talk about overtones a bit later. But this A note has a certain fundamental frequency that vibrates with a certain speed or frequency, okay? Now, based on how many times per second, the more times it vibrates per second, the higher the note that we hear, okay? And the lower the note, the less times it vibrates per second, okay? If we really slow that down, like very much, we can perceive that as rhythm, as something that is pulsating, right? Now, if we have two notes playing in the same time, the more their two rhythms correspond with each other, the more consonant their interval is. But the more complex the rhythmical figure is, the more dissonant the interval will sound, okay? Are you guys following so far? Is this making sense, and do you have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourselves, ask a question, and also you guys watching us on YouTube and Facebook, feel free to post your comments over there and we'll make sure we answer each and every one of them, okay?
Absolutely. Please feel free. You can raise your hand, just, unmute yourself and interrupt us. So,
yes.
Again.
All right. So, Luca, do you have anything you'd like to add so far?
Well, actually, the thing that you mentioned about slowing a frequency so that it becomes rhythm, that's very interesting, okay? By the same token, we can take a rhythm and speed it up and it will turn into a pitch. So that's kind of like, working the other way around from rhythm to an actual sound, an actual pitch. And there are a few videos around demonstrating that. Okay, I don't have the links at this moment, but if you guys are interested, there are some actual demonstrations on how that works. You can look for them on the web. Just sound is kind of like a product of rhythm, basically.
Yes.
So yeah,
absolutely.
Go ahead. Yep.
So yeah, guys, we're gonna take this A note, empty fifth string on the guitar, because it has a frequency of 110 hertz, which means it vibrates 110 times per second, okay? We're gonna use that particular note because it has a very simple number which we can easily multiply or divide, okay? And it will allow me to explain to you what I'm about to explain to you. All right? Have you noticed how on most guitar tuners, somewhere on the tuner you will see the number 440 written? That number is what's taken as the basic frequency for a middle A note. The middle A note on the piano, or this A note on the guitar. 5th fret of the high string, okay? The frequency of this note is 440 hertz, which means it vibrates 440 times per second, okay? So now, to take us back to the empty 5th string, let me tell you what an octave is. An octave lower means half the frequency, an octave higher, means double the frequency, okay? So now, if I go one octave below this A note, that means that this A note will have a frequency of 220 hertz. And this A note here, 2 octaves lower, will have the frequency of 110 hertz. Okay? Again, that means that this note vibrates 110 times per second. It shakes the molecules in the air 110 times per second. Okay, what does this mean? When I play this note, this A note, together with the empty 5th string, I'm playing the same note twice. I cannot do it on the piano, for instance, because there are no two same notes on the piano. But on the guitar, we do have that. If I take this A note with itself, or this B note with this B note, it's just an interval of a root note with itself, okay? Why does this sound consonant with each other? Because if we slow it down, if it was a rhythm, which it is actually, but let's say that we are talking about 110 beats per minute and not per second, okay? Beats per minute. That reminds me of a metronome, okay? Let's say that I set one metronome to 110 BPM. And then I set another metronome to the same speed, 110 BPM. If I press play in the same time, that means that these two metronomes will beat in the same time. Okay? And they will never go out of sync. They will be in sync, which in terms of musical notes, in terms of frequencies, it means that they are consonant with each other. Okay? And it doesn't sound off. It's just very clean and very pleasant. Okay? Now, if we talk about the octave, this A note together with the higher A note, again, why does it sound clean and nice and consonant? Well, because their rhythms correspond to each other. They meet very often. So while this one beats one time, the higher note will beat two times, and they will create rhythms such as this one. One time this one, two times this one. Okay? If I take this A note with 2 octaves higher A note, 110 Hertz, 440 Hertz, they are creating this kind of a rhythm. One time, 4 times. And then they meet and beat in the same time again and again and again. Okay? Do you understand what I'm saying so far?
So just to add very quickly to what Victor is talking about right here. So that relationship between frequency, we can easily find it on a single string, okay? By using what we know as the natural harmonics of the string, right? So if I play my open A string, okay, this is the 110 Hertz frequency. If I play the same note 1 octave higher, I can use my harmonic on the 12th fret. Okay? Which is actually physically splitting in half the length of the string.
Yes.
From down here, okay, from the nut to the bridge. Okay? So this would be 220, and if I look for the next octave, which is the harmonic on the 5th fret, I'm not sure if you guys can hear it. Is it coming through?
Yes.
This is actually the 440, okay? So we can see that relationship right here. And actually, this harmonic is dividing the string in 4 equal parts.
Yes.
So that's one thing. You can find that relationship very easily here. Then it's very interesting what Victor was talking about, rhythmically speaking, because last Thursday we were talking about rhythmic notation. So this goes perfectly hand in hand. So basically, it's kind of like when we're comparing quarter notes to eighth notes, okay? They beat twice as fast. Or comparing the quarter notes to the 16th notes. So there's always that relationship between rhythm and pitch, which is actually what Victor has been talking about. Awesome. Let's keep going.
Yes. We're gonna expand a little more on the harmonics talk a bit later. Let me just demonstrate some other intervals to you. Basically, guys, a note is just one note. A chord is when you have three notes, at least three notes or more playing in the same time. An interval is when you have two notes in the same time. The distance between the two notes is called an interval, okay? You probably know that this is an octave and that this is a fifth. The power chord on the guitar is actually a perfect fifth. That's what it's called, okay? Now, we already talked about what the root note with itself sounds like as a rhythm, beating in the same time, and the octave beats twice versus once. Now, the fifth as an interval is still consonant enough, not as consonant as the octave, but still quite consonant, okay? And that is because the rhythm that is being created between the root note and the fifth is actually a polyrhythm of 2 against 3, and it would sound something like this. 2 times, 3 times. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And on every third beat, on the next one, they meet and they beat in the same time, okay? Now, the further we go, let's say if we take the fourth now as an interval, the perfect fourth, it still has a consonant enough sound and the rhythm is still danceable enough, okay? And it's the rhythm of the fourth as an interval is like 4 against 3. Okay? While one of them is playing 4 beats, the other one is playing 3 beats, and then they meet and beat in the same time. Okay? Alright. Now, the further we go, the more dissonant the intervals become. So if I take, for instance, this flat 5, the devil's interval, it is quite dissonant. Or if I take a flat second, still very dissonant, because that means that these two notes create a rhythm that is very, very complex and they meet sometime in the future, but not very near future, okay? So you can just think of this. I explained the note with itself as 2 metronomes beating in the same time all the time. Now imagine that you set a metronome, let's say that this A note is 110 and this B flat note is somewhere around 120 Hertz. Imagine setting one metronome to 110 BPM and another metronome at 120. They're gonna start in the same time, but this one will be a bit faster than the first one and they will start drifting further and further away from each other, and it will a longer time will pass until they meet to beat in the same time, okay? Almost like you can even imagine that as 2 lines that are almost parallel with each other, but not completely. And then they can start and they will start drifting further and further away from it. Or if they are going closer to each other, they will, somewhere in the future, they will cut, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so that's basically what it is. And as I said, it's a spectrum. There is no consonant and dissonant per se. Some things are more consonant, some things are a bit less consonant and more dissonant. Some things are very dissonant, okay? Based on how often they meet to beat in the same time, okay? All right, now to start explaining what chords are about and why the major chord sounds pleasant and why the minor chord sounds a bit sadder than the major chord, first I need to explain to you what overtones are, which Luca mentioned before. Basically, guys, overtones are, we can easily hear them on the guitar. If I play the empty string and then I play the 12th fret harmonic or the 7th fret, 5th fret, 4th fret, and so on, all of these are called the higher harmonics of the note. The fundamental note, let's say again the A string, the fundamental note is 110 Hertz, but there are also many other notes that we can hear in the background, like overtones or higher harmonics, that's what they're called, okay? Now, what are the higher harmonics? The higher harmonics are all of the whole number multiplies of the fundamental frequency, okay? So, if the fundamental frequency is 110, we can also hear in the background 220 Hertz, 330, 440, 550, 660, 770, and so on, up until the 13th multiplication, and that's where they become very inaudible. Okay? Very quiet. Each next harmonic is more quiet than the previous one. But actually, you can hear them easily on the guitar. If I have the bridge pickup chosen and I plug the string closer to the bridge, I'm going to trigger more of the higher harmonics. But if I use the neck pickup with the tone control rolled down and I plug the string here with my thumb, which is softer than the pick, you see how softer it sounds? It's still the same note, the same fundamental note, but it has a different color, a different timbre. And the color of sound is actually made up by how much harmonics you can hear in the background, okay? So that's why this note is the same note as this one, but it has a different color because when I play it like this, you can hear this and this and this and this, this, and so on, all of the harmonics, okay? Now if we start analyzing the harmonics and which notes they actually are, we will find that we have, listen to this melody. What I played is actually a chord. To be more specific, this is a dominant 9 chord. And there is also a sharp 11 somewhere inside the harmonic series, but we're not going to talk about that now. We're just going to stick with the first few harmonics. Okay? What is this? This is an A major chord. The major chord is actually already included in the harmonic series of the root note. And that's why the major chord sounds pleasant. Because what I play up here is in sync or consonant with the higher harmonics of the fundamental note. And that's also why when I play a minor chord, it sounds sad, because it is this minor third of the chord, this note, is neglecting the major third already included in the harmonic series. It creates a slight dissonance, and that's why it sounds sad to us, okay? Because something is off, something is not right. Okay?
Yeah, that's super interesting, you know, what you mentioned at first about the notes that are actually in the harmonic series, because, you know, that dominant chord, you know, is actually created by a minor seventh interval, okay? So, and we'll get into intervals eventually, okay? But this kind of, you know, makes me think, well, you know, when I play a major scale, right? That seventh is actually a major seventh. It's not a minor seventh as it occurs naturally, right? So it's interesting, you know, one thing that I might think of is because basically, well, I would say most music of the Western civilization is based on that major scale. But that major scale is not actually in nature. The scale that would be in nature following those partial harmonics would actually be a mode with the Mixolydian mode. Right? So, you know, one thing that I would ask is, well, why is, Western music based on the major scale as opposed to being based on the Mixolydian mode? Since it's kind of like, what occurs in nature. Anyway, just a thought, basically.
Even more so because in the harmonic series, there is also a sharp 4.
Right.
So you can say that it's actually the most natural scale coming from the harmonic series is actually a Lydian flat 7, okay?
Right, which is actually
Yeah.
which is a mode of the melodic minor scale.
Yes, a mode
actually.
of the melodic minor, yeah.
Right.
Okay, and the chord that would correspond here is this kind of a chord. Okay?
Yeah.
And it's crazy
Yes.
because I believe that when alchemists talked about the music of the spheres and stuff like that, they perceived it as sort of a Lydian scale or something.
Well, there is actually, an important work which is called, the Lydian chromatic concept.
Ah, yes. George Russell, right?
George Russell, exactly. So his thesis is actually that, the music should be based on the Lydian mode as opposed to on the major scale.
Yes.
So yeah. Anyway, just food for thought, I guess.
Yeah. So basically, guys, let's just go back to the harmonic series for just a short while, and then we'll talk about chords and how chords are created and why certain chords go with each other, okay? Now, as Luca mentioned before, if you split the string, or any object for that matter, if I take this glass, it has a certain frequency when I hit it with a hard object, right? If this glass was the exact half of this size, it would have had twice the frequency, 1 octave higher. Or if it was twice as big, but exactly twice as big in volume and twice as full with water, it would have had the exact octave lower than this, okay? Now, the string itself, if we split it in half, which is the 12th fret, we will get 1 octave higher from the note. If we split it in 3 equal parts, we will hear the 5th as an interval. If we split it in 4 equal parts, we'll hear the 2nd octave, the 2 octaves higher than the original. If we split it in 5 equal parts, we will hear the 3rd. Okay, that's why the polyrhythm of a root against the 3rd is a 5 against 4. Sorry, let me. Five times, 4 times. But it is already a much more complex polyrhythm, and it sounds quite more dissonant than the 5th, for instance, but also quite more consonant than a minor 3rd. This sounds a bit more dissonant than this, right? Anyway, now that means that basically the string, when I pluck it, it vibrates with the main frequency, plus it creates a stomach of the amplitude halfway through, and on each 3rd of its length, and on each 4th of its length, on each 5th of its length, 6th, 7th, etc., etc. So that means that it is vibrating in many directions in the same time, the more overtones we hear, okay? Alright, so now, what are chords and how do we create them, okay? As we already said, inside the harmonic series, there is a chord included and very audible in the note itself. How do we create this chord? Now I'm gonna go back to the C major scale to simplify it, because the C major scale doesn't have any sharps or flats. If we look at it on the piano, we will only see white keys, no black keys, okay? So to simplify it, we'll stick to the C major scale now, regardless of the number of the frequencies, okay? Now we won't talk about frequency numbers anymore. Anyway, here's the C major scale. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C again, okay? Now, the method for creating chords, we already said that two notes in relation with each other create an interval. We need at least 3 notes to have a chord, or more than 3 notes. How do we create chords? By taking one note as a root note, jumping 1/3 above scale-wise, and one more third above the third, which is the 5th of the root. So that means that if I have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, whatever, I will need the notes to create the first chord in the C major scale. I'm gonna need the notes number 1, which is C, number 3, which is E, and number 5, which is G. Okay? So jumping in thirds, stacking thirds on top of each other. Okay? If I use the notes C, E, and G, C, E, G, and then again C, E, this is a C major chord. Okay? And it's only logical that the first chord in the C major scale would be a C major chord, of course. Right? Let's also take a look at that on the keyboard. Okay? Give me just 1 second. Let me share my second camera with you. Here we go. Can you see this angle now? I suppose you can.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
I can see. Yeah, we
fix
can see the
this camera
keyboard.
somehow. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, let's go. A C major scale would be if I start with a C note and play only white keys up to the next C note. Can you hear the keyboard?
Yeah, it's coming through. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So now, that means that if I take this note and then the 3rd and the 5th, this chord is a C major chord. Okay? Now we'll check all of the other chords in the key of C major and we'll see which chords we will have at disposal when playing in the key of C major. Okay? How do we do that? Well, first thing we need to clarify is what is a major chord and what is a minor chord. Okay? If we have a chord that has a root and the major 3rd and the 5th, a perfect 5th, that's what's called a major chord. Okay? If we have a chord with a root, a minor 3rd, and the 5th, that's a minor chord or a minor triad. Major triad, minor triad. Okay? Triad because it has 3 notes. Later, when we're gonna expand on the chord and add more notes to it, it won't be called a triad anymore. It's gonna be called a 7th chord or a 9th chord or whatever. We'll get there. Anyway, so what is a major 3rd and what is a minor 3rd? You see, each interval has its own gap, its own distance from the root note up to the next note. Okay? The smallest distance that we know of in Western music is a half step. That's the smallest interval. That's 1 fret on the guitar. Okay? The next one is a whole step, then 1.5 step, so 3 frets on the guitar, 2 whole steps, 2.5 steps, etc., etc. Each of the intervals, root, minor 2nd, major 2nd, minor 3rd, major 3rd, 4th, flat 5, 5th, minor 6, major 6, minor 7th, major 7th, and the octave, and then the intervals above the octave as well. Each of them has its own particular distance of how many half steps or whole steps does it sit above the root note. Okay? If I take this root note, the C note, together with the 3rd of the C major scale, which is 1, 2, 3, Do, Re, Mi, or C, D, E. So these 2 notes, C as a root and E, I will find that this E note sits exactly 2 whole steps above the root note. That's a major 3rd. A major 3rd is 2 whole steps of a distance. That means that a minor 3rd will be a slightly shorter distance. In other words, 1.5 step. Okay? So that's why if we take a look at the C major scale, we will have 1, 2, 3. But if we take a look at the C minor scale, we will have 1, 2, 3. Okay, you see in the major scale this was the third, 2 whole steps. In the minor scale this is the third, 1.5 step. Okay, now if we have a chord that has a major third inside of it, that will be a major chord. If the chord has a minor third inside of it, it will be a minor chord. Okay, no matter the other ornaments inside the chord. If the third is minor, the chord is minor. If the third is major, the chord is major. End of story. Okay? So now let's check all of the chords in the C major scale and see what they're about. Which chords will we have at disposal? First, I'm gonna show you the keyboard again, and I'm gonna explain to you the method for creating chords. So when I took the first note, C, I jumped 1/3 above it and 1 more third, and thus I created the first chord in the key. To create the second chord, which will be a D chord because D is the second note in the key, this will be the chord D something something, right? In other words, D, F, A. Then the next chord will be this one, starting with E, 1/3 above and 1 more third above. The next chord will be an F chord, G, A, B, and then the last one is actually the B chord, and then we are coming back to the beginning, the C major chord 1 octave higher. Okay? So now let's check which of these chords will be minor and which of them will be major. To do that, I'm gonna simplify it for you because the guitar is a very, very visual instrument, okay? And there is no actual need to over-theoretize over things, okay? You can just take a look at it and see the way it looks like and be able to tell whether it's this or that, okay? Let me explain what I mean. You probably already know that this chord is a C major. You also probably already know that this is a D major and this is a D minor. Okay? Now, we already said that the first chord in C major will of course be a C major chord. What is the second chord gonna be? The question is whether it's gonna be a minor chord or a major chord. It's gonna start with a D note, of course, because D is the second note in the key of C. But is it gonna be major or minor? We can check that out theoretically, or we can just play a D major chord and then a D minor chord and see which one fits. What's the difference between a D major and a D minor? Is this note, right? The D major has this note and the D minor has this one. Now, this note is an F sharp note. You probably already know that. The second fret of the E string is an F sharp note, whilst this note on the first fret is an F note. Okay? Now, since we did not have an F sharp note in the C major scale, that means that we do not have a D major chord. We will have a D minor chord because we need this F note. We don't have an F sharp note. And inside the D minor chord, we have an F note for a third, which would be a minor third of D. So that means that the second chord in C major is a D minor chord. Okay?
So basically, just very quickly, to kind of summarize, when we are building chords from a scale, we are kind of talking about a family of chords, okay? Because the relationship is that they all come from the same scale. So basically, these are known as, the diatonic chords, okay? Diatonic actually meaning it belongs to a specific scale or a specific key. So when we're building chords inside a key or inside a tonality, we want to use always the same notes as the scale. And that is why the F sharp, doesn't belong in C major. That's the reason why the second chord is actually a D minor and not a D major, because the interval between the note D, which is the root of our chord, and its third is 1.5 steps, and that makes it a minor third. As opposed to the first chord, we're going from C to E. Okay, we can actually see the distance on the guitar. Guitar is actually very practical because, as Victor mentioned, it's a very visual instrument. So here is the first interval, right? A major third, but for the second chord, we're going to have a minor third. So again, the important thing is that we are only using the notes of the C major scale to build chords that belong to that same family, so to speak.
Yes. That's it. I hope you understand what we mean, guys. Please let us know if something is confusing or if you have a question, okay? All right. Just to explain furthermore on that D major chord, I cannot fix this camera. Just a second. Here we go again. Here's that second angle again. Okay? If I play a D major in the key of C major, that would mean that I'm playing this chord, D, F sharp, A. So this is a black key. It does not belong. Imagine that you don't have the black keys when you play in the key of C major. You only have the white keys to work with, okay? And that's why you cannot have a D major chord. You can only have a D minor chord. All right, back to the guitar. Now let's check the rest of the chords. I just typed in the chat section for you in a vertical line the notes of the C major scale, okay? So we have the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then C again, okay? So that means that the third chord in the key of C major will be an E something, okay? Now let's check if it's gonna be an E major or an E minor. I'm just gonna play an E major and play an E minor, and I'm gonna check these two notes, which one of them does belong and which one doesn't belong in the key of C major. Since the open string, the open G string is of course a G note, and the first fret is gonna be a G sharp note, that means that the E major chord will not belong here, because for the E major chord we need this G sharp note, which we don't have at the moment. We only have a G note to work with, so the third chord in the key of C major will be an E minor chord, okay? I'm gonna write them down to you later when we go through all of them. All right? Should we go with the next chord? Okay, so the next chord is obviously going to be an F something, and with the same method. Let's try F major, F minor. In the F major we have this note, and in the F minor we have this note. This is an A note, and this is an A flat note, or a G sharp note. Because we don't have flats and sharps, we must have this A note. That means that the chord is going to be an F major, okay? Next chord is gonna be a G something. G major versus G minor. G major has this note, which is a B note, and G minor has a B flat. We don't have a B flat in C major in the scale. So that means that the fifth chord is gonna be a G major. Okay? Now the sixth chord is an A something. Let's check both again. A major and A minor. The A major has a C sharp note inside of it, and the A minor has a C note. We don't have a C sharp, of course, in the key of C, so we're gonna use an A minor chord because we have this C note at disposal, okay? So the sixth chord is gonna be an A minor. And now comes the tricky part with the seventh chord in the key, in a major key. Because the seventh chord is gonna be a B something, right? Let's check B major and B minor, just as we did so far, and we'll see that none of them will fit actually. Because yes, the B major does not fit because this is the note in the B major chord, which is a D sharp. We don't have a D sharp. But in B minor, we have this note, which is a D note. We do have a D note in C major, so that means that this chord could be a B minor, but it's not, because there is another problem with this chord, and that's the fifth. You see, the fifth in the B minor chord is an F sharp note, but we have only an F note here, not an F sharp. So that means that this chord will need to have a flat fifth, a diminished fifth, or a flat 5, so to say, okay? So that's gonna be a B minor chord with a flat 5, and that's what's called a diminished triad, okay? A chord that has a root, a minor third, and a flat 5, or a diminished fifth, okay? So instead of having this kind of an arpeggio, root, minor third, perfect fifth, it will have this arpeggio, root, minor third, flat 5. This is a flat 5, the devil's interval, the dissonant one. So the seventh chord in the key of C major is gonna be a B half diminished, a B diminished triad, that's what it's called. Okay? Okay, so yeah, do you see what Luca is typing in the chat section? That means that the first chord will be a C major. The second chord is gonna be a D minor. Third chord, E minor. Fourth chord, F major. Fifth chord, G major. Sixth chord, A minor. And the seventh chord is gonna be a B diminished. Okay? Here's another chart. Yes. Yes. What Luca is writing, C, E, G. That means these are the notes in the chord. C is the root, E is the third, G is the fifth of the chord. Okay? And so on with the next ones. So anyway, C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and B diminished triad. Here they are again. Now, this means that if we just scratch out the letters, the same rule will apply for any major scale. Let's say that we are talking about A major. This is the scale. I have the notes A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, and A again. Again, on the first degree, I will have a major chord. On the second, minor. Third, minor. Fourth, major. Fifth, major. Sixth, minor. And seventh, diminished. And then we are going back to the first one again. So if we just scratch out the letters and we're talking about any major scale, we will have this template. So first major, second minor, third minor, fourth major, fifth major, sixth minor, and seventh diminished. Okay? And that's why in many songs, very straight ahead strumming songs with chords, you will most probably have these 6 chords to work with. Usually the 7, if we're not talking about jazz and more avant-garde rock and roll music or stuff like that, in most straight ahead rock music and pop music and stuff like that, we only have the 6th chord, the first 6 chords to work with without the diminished. The diminished is usually used as an effect or as a passing chord or something, at least in straight ahead simple pop rock music, etc., etc. Okay? So anyway, you probably noticed that in many songs, if it's in A major, you will most probably have an F sharp minor somewhere, and then a D major somewhere, and an E major somewhere, and maybe a B minor and a C sharp minor, and nothing else rather than that. Or if we are in C major, we will probably have a C major chord, and then a G major somewhere, an F major, and then A minor, D minor, E minor, and that's about it, okay? This does not mean that you are not allowed to use a different chord. But if you do so, you are already either altering something in the scale or moving to a different key. Because if you hear something like this, this chord does not belong in the key of C major. This is a G sharp major. But it doesn't sound bad. It sounds very good. We're just no longer in the key of C major, okay? We're just moving to a different key. That's what's happening.
Yes. Yeah, the other thing that happens is that basically we can also borrow chords from other scales and add them to our diatonic chord progression. But this is obviously a topic for a different lesson. So for now, the important thing is that you understand how the chords are built. Okay, where do they come from? That kind of like little formula that, major chords have a root, a major third, and a fifth, a perfect fifth. A minor chord is going to have a root, a minor third, and a perfect fifth. And a diminished chord is going to have a root, a minor third, and a diminished fifth. So that's the other thing. And finally, what Victor mentioned, which is super important, that little template that we're always going to have major chords on the first, the fourth, and the fifth degree or note of the scale. Okay, degree is just another word for note. On the first, the fourth, and the fifth note of the scale, we're always going to have major chords. On the second, the third, and the sixth, we're always going to have minor chords. And on the seventh note or seventh degree, the chord is going to be diminished, at least when we're talking about triads. So that's kind of like, the three big things to remember and understand, basically. Any questions at all?
Colin has a question. How do you get, say, major, minor, seventh? What do you mean by that, Colin?
So would that be a
You can just
major
unmute
chord?
yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I just saw, I forget where I was, and I was looking at something, and it came up, and it was written as, I can't even remember, I think I was laying bar chord, but on the sixth string or seventh, and turned out when I looked in the chord analyzer, it came up with a major minor seventh chord, and I'm thinking, well, how does that work? Maybe the analyzer was wrong, I don't know, but
Good question. No, it comes from a different scale. If we...
Yeah, but I'm sorry, Victor. It might be minor major seventh, not
could be the way
major minor seventh.
a minor
The other way
major.
around.
Yeah, could be that. Yeah.
Yes.
Minor major seventh. Yes.
Minor major seventh would mean a minor chord as a triad plus a sharp seven or major seven inside that chord, which would be this kind of a chord. Now this comes from a different scale. This comes from the harmonic minor scale most of the time, which is a minor scale with a sharp seven.
Yep. If you want, play the scale while I play the chord, Victor. So. Yeah, that's the sound of that chord against the scale, exactly. It comes from a minor scale, absolutely.
Yeah. But for a natural minor scale, guys, and for a natural minor key, you just need to, I don't know if you know the rule for creating a minor scale out of the major, but the schoolbook rule says this. If you start the major scale on the sixth step, and you start a new scale here, but play the same row of notes. So in the case of C major, that would mean C, D, E, F, G, A. A is the sixth step. If we start a new scale here that is going to have the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and A again, that's the relative minor. This is an A minor scale which is relative to C major, which means that it has the exact same notes, okay? But it starts at a different spot. And in this case, the roles are changing. What was sixth step in the major scale is now first step in the minor scale, okay? And you will have the same chords, only shifted. You will have a number one chord, which is going to be a minor. Now the second chord is going to be the diminished chord, which was previously the seventh chord in the key of C major. Now on the third step, you'll have the actual C major chord, okay? Because A, B, C. Then on the fourth step, you'll have the D minor 5th step E minor, 6th step F major, and 7th step G major. Okay? Sorry? Okay?
So that's another important point. This order, like major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, maintains. It's always the same. It's always that order, right? So if you start from a different chord, like Victor did right now, okay, he started on the 6th chord. So after the 6th chord, which is minor, comes the 7th chord, which is always going to be diminished. And then we go back to the 1, which is going to be major. So we're actually just basically, just changing, shifting, our starting point. But every other chord is going to be in that same order.
Mirko Skender from Zagreb, I suppose. I suppose you were from the Balkans, says parallel in the comments on Facebook. Yes, Mirko, I am also from the Balkans, so yes, that's what we call parallel scale over here, but in English it's called a relative scale. That's why I'm using that term. Okay, guys, we are almost done because I have to start another lesson in the academy in a few minutes. Do you have any questions? Is this clear and is this helpful?
Any questions at all? Yes, and I just dropped again the link here in the chat if you're interested in knowing more about Academy and having these type of lessons on a, almost everyday basis, basically. Please feel free to check that link. So, yes, I mean, this is kind of like the ABCs of harmony. That's the part of music called harmony, basically, right? Or the study of chords. So I'm thinking we could do a follow-up with this eventually, yes. On how we can make chord progressions. What are the most common chord progressions? Kind of like, because each chord has kind of like a natural tendency to move to another chord. So this is very interesting because it's kind of like, our first chord is kind of like the, what determines the key. It's kind of like my center of gravity, and kind of like all of the other chords tend to have, they have a tendency to move towards that one chord in, a higher or lower level. And each chord actually has its own tendency to move. Basically the second chord generally moves either to the first or the third. The third chord has its own tendency. So that's something that can be, expanded. I'm thinking on a next lesson, which could be, okay, now that we know what the 7 chords are in the scale, how can we mix them and how can we build chord progressions, with just a couple of rules. So that's, I think, a great topic as a follow-up for this lesson today, Victor. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, we'll do that soon. And one more time, guys, before we finish, we are Luca and Victor from the GuitarZoom Academy. This is what we do every day, all day at the Academy, but in a much more personalized way with every student, creating a success path for each and one of the students. And if you like what you saw today, you can consider joining the Academy. Click on that link that we left in the chat sections on YouTube and Facebook. And we'd like to see you in Academy, okay? Thank you for watching.
Thank you so much for joining. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Absolutely. Bye. Hope to see you soon.